Welcome to the sixth video in the series about social media for academics. In this one, we are going to discuss my favorite platform, Twitter. First of all, we are going to provide a number of descriptions by 8-year-old children, right? So, for those of you that are not well aware about Twitter, maybe you're going to get a sense about what the platform is. So, this child is telling us Twitter is like a big wall where anyone can write down their thoughts. Or Twitter is an internet site where people write and share messages about what they do, what they like, and what they think. You can follow other people on Twitter and read their messages. Twitter is an app for people to say things. Others can read those things, and if they like them, they can retweet them. Twitter is a place where people talk about their lives. People can write about what they are doing or thinking or about their feelings. They can also write about things they like and things they dislike. You can talk with other people like in a chat. So this is more or less the feeling that many people have about Twitter. If you are a heavy user of the platform, probably you agree with most of that, but you know that we are missing plenty of things here. The thing is that to understand Twitter, you have to spend time on Twitter. So, let's go on discussing this platform. Twitter appeared in 2006, but it only got popular from 2007. Today, it's defined as a social network and microblogging service. But the thing is that nobody really knew what Twitter was useful for at the moment of its creation. That is, beyond publishing short messages, at that moment 140 characters for those people following you. Actually, along the years, different definitions were provided by the platform itself. For instance, in 2006, it was self-described as a tool for staying in touch and keeping up with friends. Next year, it was a global community of friends and strangers answering one simple question: what are you doing? At that point, where they were asking people to answer, what are you doing, is from the origin of the myth about Twitter is the platform where you are going to tell that you're eating a sandwich. Okay, that's a bit old. Maybe it was true at the very beginning of 2007, but it changed very quickly. In 2008, it was a service for friends, family, and coworkers to communicate and stay connected, but they still keep the "what are you doing" question. In 2009, it changed from "what are you doing" to "share and discover what's happening right now anywhere in the world." At that point, Twitter moved into something different, and it became the platform where the whole world was having a chat. So the thing is that it transmute from where you're going to talk about you eating a sandwich to the platform where you are going to go to learn what's going on Ukraine from the very president of Ukraine. Okay? So it changed a lot at that moment, and then it turned into something extremely popular. You may say, yes, I understand that appealing for journalists and politicians, but why should me, an academic, someone devoted to teaching and research, pay attention to Twitter? As I told you once and again, social media is useful for you to keep up to date in your area of expertise, to keep contact with peers and students, and to disseminate your work, to spread your voice among peers and the general public. Of course, you can use virtually any social media platform for that, but Twitter is the one where you can do that in the most easy way. On other platforms, you need to create rather elaborate content. If you are creating a video like this one, you need to prepare the graphical material, you need to record the video, you're going to need to edit the video, upload it, create subtitles. It's going to take a long time. Not in this case, because remember, it's a byproduct, but it's going to take time. If you are keeping a blog, you need to provide reasonably long text. But in Twitter, they are short, at most 208 characters at this moment. So it's rather easy. In addition to that, you can take advantage of Twitter even without tweeting, that is, being a lurker and using it just as a source of information. The beauty of using Twitter without tweeting is that slowly, step by step, you're going to learn the tricks of the platform and you're going to get more confident and start using it in different ways and eventually produce your own content. Finally, even though Twitter is not the favorite platform of academics, it's ResearchGate, as you may remember, it's the most handy for them. And there is a substantial minority there, particularly among early career researchers. So the thing is that there is a critical mass to start weaving networks of collaboration in Twitter. And that's why I constantly tell everybody, you should be on Twitter. The thing is that before discussing those possible academic uses of Twitter, we need to learn some Twitter terms. Should you be a heavy user of Twitter, you can skip this part, but if you are not a user, maybe you can find this helpful. First of all, the profile. The profile is a page displaying information about whom the account belongs to. Basically, you're going to provide a picture, your name, an alias or username, a short bio, a link to the personal website, and it's going to take into account the number of followers and following. It's going to show them. Except for the followers and following, all of the other information is provided by you. And although the personal website is optional, it's really wise to link it. And again and again, I'm telling you, you need a personal website. So you can link it from Google Scholar and you can link it from Twitter. Then we have tweets. Tweets are the messages. They are short, at most 280 characters. Of course, although they are basically text, you can include links to any kind of resource. You can include hashtags, images, videos, or polls. Remember platform convergence. You can use basically any kind of multimedia content in any kind of platform. So even though Twitter is mostly text-based, you can include images and videos. What's a retweet? A retweet means simply that you are sharing, that you are repeating a tweet from another user with your followers. So the thing is that you are injecting content from your following into your audience, and they may not be aware of that content. So retweets are extremely useful to spread information across the different bubbles where we live in. Like the tiny heart icon is just a show of appreciation, a nudge to another person. You see that tweet, you like it, and you are telling him privately, well, not rather privately, because anybody can look at the likes and look who's liking that tweet, but you're telling that person, I like your tweet. A quote tweet. A quote tweet is a special kind of retweet. In retweets, you are just repeating verbatim the tweet. It's appearing in the timeline of your followers. With a quote tweet, you can add comments before resharing the original tweet. Ratio. This is a kind of Twitter law, and by a law, I'm not meaning regulation, I'm meaning kind of a natural law. The idea is that by looking at the metrics of a tweet, you can very quickly know if the tweet is a good tweet or it's a bad tweet. I mean, if you have a tweet with a huge number of retweets and a huge number of likes, probably it's something very, very interesting, amazing, funny. But if you have a tweet with plenty of replies. That is, people replicating to that tweet, and very low numbers of retweets or likes, it means that the tweet is bad. Okay, it's a really, really unpopular content. Following are the accounts you are following on Twitter to read their tweets and retweets, while followers are any of the users subscribe to your tweets and retweets. Please note that relationships in Twitter are not reciprocal. I mean, you can follow someone and that person doesn't need to follow back you, and vice versa. You get a follower, very nice, I don't need to follow you either. So this is very different from LinkedIn or from Facebook, and I think it's crucial for the success of Twitter. The timeline. The timeline is a real-time, chronologically updated stream of tweets that contains all of the tweets and retweets produced by the accounts you are following. You can also have a algorithmically curated timeline by hardcore users that have been for a very, very long time on Twitter. We tend to dislike that. You have to, if you're new to Twitter, just try and test which of the two flavors you prefer. The one that is ordered according to time, or the one that is curated by the algorithm. Replies were mentioned before when talking about radios. A reply is a tweet the user writes in response to another user's tweet. Hashtags, you're probably used to see hashtags everywhere, are just words with the hash symbol put before, and they are used to label tweets. You can label tweets as related to a topic, or many times they are related to a particular event. I don't know, the Super Bowl, the Oscars, or a given conference you are attending or you are following in Twitter. Hashtags are heavily associated with trending topics. Trending topics are just phrases or hashtags related to some popular current event. It's obviously algorithmically created, and although trending topics are really obviously popular, it's quite difficult for a hashtag or a topic related to academia to become a trending topic. Well, of course not if you are landing some rover or probe in Mars. That's going to be a trending topic, but most of us don't work on such issues. Mentions. Mentions should not be confused with replies. Now, reply, you see a tweet from someone and you want to write a response to that person's tweet. A mention is a tweet that you write out of the blue and you cite some users. It doesn't need to be a reply. The thing is that in Twitter, in academic Twitter, it's very normal to mention people you're working with, people you are trying to involve in a conversation, or a typical case when you are tweeting about a new publication. It's really good manners to mention all of the authors that have a Twitter account. That way, other people can learn about other interesting accounts. I mean, if they are following you, maybe they are interested in following your co-authors. Direct messages are private texts that are sent from one user to another user, and they don't appear in public timelines, they don't appear in search results. Muting, it's a feature by Twitter, so you can simply make tweets from a person you don't want to hear about. They don't appear in your timeline, and you can also mute words and hashtags and phrases. So the thing is that this way you can prune, you can decide which topics are going to appear in your timeline, because maybe you are not interested. For instance, this has been recorded on March 2022, And the thing is, oh, I don't want to hear about Will Smith and the slap and Chris Rock anymore. So I mute those phrases and words, and my timeline is clean of slap issues. And then we have blocks. Blocking means that you are avoiding someone to follow you, to read your tweets, to be able to share your tweets and be able to interact with you at all. When we're going to discuss later the downsides of using social media in academia. Some of those downsides are trolls. So when dealing with trolls, harassers, really toxic people, eventually you need to block them. So the thing is that mention and replies are going to allow you to interact with other people. That's why, or that's how you're going to chat. And the thing is that when mentions and replies by someone you're following appear in your timeline, they are going to be useful for you to discover new interesting people to start following. Retweets allow an idea to quickly spread across different bubbles, different tiny audiences. For instance, sharing a new tool, a new paper, a new idea. Eventually, they can give rise to a trending topic, although probably that's going to be rather unlikely in academia, except for those people working in really interesting, amazing things like, I don't know, landing rovers on Mars. Hashtags are really useful to label the content that is being produced in an event or within a community. For instance, there are some lecture clubs, reading clubs that use a hashtag. Some educators are using hashtags to label tweets regarding their live tweeting by their students, or for instance watching a documentary. And of course, conferences rely heavily on using hashtags. So everybody attending that conference, even though they don't follow each other on Twitter, they can get connected through the hashtag. And finally, trending topics help to keep you up to date with current affairs, even though most of those affairs are not going to be highly related to academic issues. Here you have a typical profile. As I told you, I'm going to heavily rely on my own practice. So here you have my profile, and the different parts are this. Here you have a header picture. Many people use that just like for decoration purposes, or it's empty. You shouldn't do that. You should put there something that is informative, or that provides a high recall, that you are somehow appearing in the memory of your audience. In my case, I'm putting here a number of publications by myself. The profile picture, usually it's going to be a photograph of yourself taken by a professional. It should be a good photograph, but I understand that many people, especially women, are not going to be really comfortable sometimes posting their own picture because they may attract some undesirable attention. So you should decide on using maybe a drawing by a professional, an avatar, or using a logo. The thing is that when that tiny circle appears in the timeline of people, they should very quickly know who you are and remembering you. The name should be the name you use in your publications, because by using that in a search engine, they could look for additional information about you. As you may see, I'm not adding PhD or nothing like that, or as associate professor or things like that to my name. Oh, that's my choice, but in some cases that um, getting people not putting that, it's getting people disrespected. So you should decide if you're going to add your credentials or not to your name. The username is also rather important. If you're starting new on Twitter, you should change it. You shouldn't just keep um, that really annoying names they are producing, which is since most of us are having repeating names and surnames, they add a bunch of numbers at the end, like a license plate. Don't keep that username. Uh, Once you decide on that username, although you can change it at any moment, it may be difficult for other people, especially if they're writing their mentions, remembering your name. And in my case, there is a long and convoluted history for my username. This Twitter account was used mainly linked with my original blog that was devoted to help students with their uh, final studies project in an engineering degree. It's, and in Spanish, at that moment, that was called Proyecto Fin de Carrera, literally translated to end of career project, and it made sense to use that acronym PFC. The thing is that for English speakers, they in the end thought that I had some kind of military background, and in one conference one person asked me if I really was a private first class, and they didn't understand the reason for that. And so I invented a new acronym. It was Pretty Fly Chap. Okay, but the thing is that think about your username. Don't simply pick something like Texas Hottie or things like that. The biography. The biography, you should think about that, but it's going to change through time. You should answer the who you are, where you're working, what you're doing at least. As you may see, you can include mentions to other accounts and you can include links. So it's a really valuable part of the profile. The location makes sense, so people know where you are, and the personal website, if you have it, is really important to be linked from your profile. And finally, you have the pinned tweet. The pinned tweet is a great feature of Twitter because otherwise, when people visiting your profile, they are going to see your last tweet. If you are really professional, your last tweet is going to be a professional and academic tweet. But if you are a bit of a clown like myself, maybe it's something really weird or unrelated to scholarship. So my pinned tweet, it's not very academic, but it's a warning. I'm warning my new followers, okay, this is not the typical scholar account. As I said, I'm a comprehensive self. Here you have a typical tweet. Here in this tweet you have plenty of things. You have, of course, text. You have a hashtag. We mentioned hashtag here. This was a meme that took place last year. There was a comic by XKCD about types of scientific paper, and um, plenty of researchers started creating their own version for their own area of knowledge. So I created a mood board. As you may remember, I told you I'm a great fan of mood boards. I created a mood board to collect all of those memes, all of those versions, and I shared the mood board. So it was easier for me to collect new versions because if more people were aware of this mood board, they could simply add me, they could simply send me an email so I could add the comic instead of trying to search for all of them on Twitter. Okay, so that hashtag was used by many people to tag their comics. Here you have also mentions, In this case, this person is mentioning both the author of the original comic and me, because that person is sharing my mood board. Here, this is the author of the tweet simply wrote an URL, but for a number of resources. If you include that URL, Twitter is going to provide this tiny card with a thumbnail and a brief description of the resource, for instance, for videos, for mood boards in Milanote, and so on. So this is a typical tweet. The thing is that all of this is just telling you where the different buttons and levers and features of the platform. And of course you need that in order to conduct yourself on Twitter, but it's different from knowing how to use Twitter. So I've provided you with this, and what you need is something like this, okay? Of course, in the end, the best driving practice is practice driving. So in the end, what you need to learn how to use Twitter is using Twitter. But let's talk a little bit about not just features of Twitter, but the daily basis of using Twitter. I insist on this because even though social media platforms are multi-purpose tools and you can virtually use any of them to for your academic day-to-day, I find Twitter the most handy. Okay, if you remember the Springer Nature survey and report, the thing is that every social media platform excelled in two, at most three cases, three use cases. And Twitter was very important for those using Twitter for discovering and reading content, for comment and debating with others, for sharing content, for self-promotion. And the thing is that all of those aspects are really crucial for academics. I think that they cover mostly everything you need to do to create a complete, full academic persona. And I'm going to reorganize them under three different classes: weaving collaboration networks, disseminating your work, and visibility and audience creation. Okay, so the thing is that of course you can try to do that in any kind of platform, or of course you could try to do that, for instance, using YouTube. But the thing is that it's going to be more difficult in YouTube to, for instance, create a network of collaborators, because not so many researchers are on Facebook. Of course you can try to use just, I don't know, ORCID or ResearchGate, but in that case your audience is going to be a bit limited to just your peers, colleagues, and other academics, and it's not going to be quite broad. You're not going to have journalists, you're not going to have practitioners, you're not going to have the general public. So the thing is that Twitter alone is really useful, and I insist again, if you combine a personal website, a Google Scholar profile, and a Twitter account linked among them, you're going to have a very strong core to achieve that complete, full academic persona. The thing is that before going with those three classes of important actions to perform on Twitter, they are going to be each of them in one video. I have some recommendations on consuming and using Twitter, and the on the preemptive deletion of tweets, removal of tweets. So let's start discussing how to consume Twitter on a healthy way. Of course, this is my advice. This works for me. I think it can work for you, but you have to develop your own habits. I think the very first thing you need to do is avoid toxic people. And the thing is that you need to define what is toxic for you. It's going to depend on each of you. The thing is that you don't follow toxic people. And if someone you started following and with time that person starts behaving in a toxic way, you simply unfollow. It doesn't really it doesn't really worth the issues is going to cause you that toxic behavior. It doesn't matter that the papers are great, it doesn't matter that the advice sometimes is great if it's toxic. Of course, if you find something that goes beyond toxic, it's harassing someone, block and report. If you are following someone that is not toxic by themselves, but is retweeting or quoting from time to time toxic content, you have to treat that person as toxic and follow. Now, a different thing, uh, stupid. Everybody is stupid sometime. The thing is that it's very easy to distinguish the extremes. People that is constantly and consistently being stupid. Well, you don't follow that people. And then you have people that are bright, they are brilliant, really smart and witty. Of course, you don't have problems with that people. The problem is people in the middle, like for instance myself. Of course, from time to time I do things that I find funny and probably many people find they are stupid. So you have to decide how much stupid you are going to accept. And once someone crosses the Rubicon of idiocy, you can follow or mute that person. Okay? The thing is that you're using Twitter not for the laughs, you're using Twitter for your job. So you don't want toxicity and you don't want idiocy. You want contents that are useful, that are interesting, that are pertinent, and that they are funny. If they are not that, you don't want that. Avoid binge scrolling. How you can avoid that? From my experience, I was doing binge scrolling on Twitter when I was fearing of missing that really smart people that tweet from time to time, very seldomly, and I was worried about their really interesting tweets get lost among the timeline. So my suggestion here is that you have to create lists and you have to turn on notifications for a very few selected number of persons. That way you can very quickly go to check those really important and useful contents, and you go to your timeline that it's going to be a bit more uh, clutter and disorder when you have really time for that and you have the patience for that. Okay, so these are my advice for consuming Twitter. And now my recommendation, my rules for deciding on what, how, and when to tweet. They're loosely based on Peter Sagal's rules of Twitter. Indeed, Peter Sagal has 10 rules. I'm providing 7. So the first one, a tweet has to be informative, educational, entertaining, or funny. Of course, that's if you are trying to achieve a comprehensive self. If you are trying to be just a networked self, you're trying to be just a teaching self, you don't need to be entertaining or funny. You just have to be informational or educational. Okay? If you're going to tweet something and it's not any of those things, don't tweet it. Of course, you can think it's funny, and maybe it's only funny for you. In the end, you will learn. I'm not talking about self-censorship. I'm talking about uh, not simply uh, tweeting whatever comes to your mind. Okay? Promote the work of those below you in the academic ladder. You don't need to promote those of you that are um, higher than you on the academic ladder. They are promoting themselves and they are promoting among each other. For instance, you have a paper. And there is a graduate student co-authoring that paper. You have to mention that person when you tweet about that. And by mention that person, not only the name of that person is on Twitter, mention that account. You may say, oh, but this Pope is on the 5th or 6th place in the author list. How can I not mention that person? Well, if you have plenty of characters to do it, do it. But everybody is going to know that Pope. And everybody's going to know that Pope. And mostly nobody's going to know the graduate student. The one that is going to get the most benefit from you tweeting and mentioning is not the Pope, is the underdog. So help other people, people that need help. Don't criticize someone's work, saying something that you wouldn't dare to say them to their face. Okay? And this is important. First, you don't criticize people. Don't do that. Okay? Maybe you dislike the paper, maybe you dislike the research, but that's not a problem of the person. Of you shouldn't make that a problem of the person. But if you are not, you couldn't say that in a room full of people, or if you couldn't say that aloud, don't write that on a tweet. Never insult. Point. Mockery. It can be fine if you aim it upwards. I mean, you help those below you in the academic ladder. And if you want to make fun of someone, you have to find someone bigger than you. Okay? You don't make fun of people which is below you. That's bullying. Okay? If something makes you outraged, scared, or angry, don't tweet. Inhale, exhale, and after doing that and getting calm, think about if you really need to tweet about that. If you need to do it, tweet, but you have to be calm down. Never promote something unless you have complete trust on the source. Okay? Maybe it sounds great, maybe it sounds interesting. The contents that are big if true, think twice before sharing and retweeting. Of course, if the goal of something is growing outrage, scare, or anger, probably you shouldn't promote that. And 7, try to avoid arguments. Never argue with people. Okay? Now, in my experience, I don't delete tweets. Very seldomly delete a tweet, but some people delete everything after some time. So my point for not deleting tweets is that in the same way that blogs are outward brains, as Cory Doctorow said, to me that also apply to Twitter. And indeed, I use a very nice tool, which is Twistory, that provides you with all of your tweets in um, the same date as today. So from time to time, I remember something that was funny at the moment, or I find something that was interesting and that I had forgotten. Okay, so I don't find useful for me deleting tweets. But the thing is that some people think that you shouldn't provide munition to those willing to criticize you harshly or to decontextualize your messages. So the thing is that in order to avoid someone digging and finding a tweet that after maybe 5 years is not that nice, they delete their tweets. So if you think that that could be interesting for you, I mean, tweeting something and after a number of months it disappeared, you could use some of these tools. Remember, you can go to the slides. The link for the slides is in the description of the video, and there you can find the links for these tools. They are similar but different, and they provide different granularity levels when deleting tweets, so you have to try them. And all of these rules for consuming Twitter, all of those recommendations for behaving on Twitter, they can be summarized in one simple piece of advice. Does it spark joy? Does that person spark joy? Does that tweet going to spark joy? If not, don't follow, don't retweet, don't tweet. The idea is that your timeline should make you not happy, but at least not make you miserable. So if something is not sparking joy, drop it. Now, with Twitter, as with any other social media platform, most users are consuming content and fear producing it. We talked about this when discussing the Springer Nature survey. For instance, researchers were saying that they were using blogs when they were actually reading blogs. The thing is that, of course, I think that you don't need a seminar, much less a 5-hour seminar, to learn how to consume social media. So if you're here, probably you're interested in eventually produce content. But the thing is that you don't need to get obsessed about that, okay? It's really fine to be on Twitter just looking. It's fine. The thing is that Twitter is great because unlike other social media platforms in which you may dream about producing content, but eventually you are not going to do it. In Twitter is really easy to end up producing content. I, I'll, I'll explain this in depth. You may be watching this video, right? And maybe you think, well, this is nice. I hope you are thinking that. And you may think, well, I'd like to produce slides for some piece um, of knowledge in my area of expertise, and I'm going to do the slides this way. I'm going to look for the pictures this way, and I'm going to share the slides, and I'm going to record myself, and I'm going to upload that to YouTube. Great, okay? But of course, it's going to take time, and in the end it's going to be a bit maybe not easy to do that. I highly encourage you to try, but in the end there are going to be plenty of barriers. Or you may be a heavy user of podcasts. You may listen to plenty of podcasts and dream about creating your own podcast, but that's going to be a bit difficult. But the thing is that in Twitter you're going to start reading people, and sooner or later you're going to think, I want to reply to that person. You're going to do it. Or I want to write down this reflection I'm doing, and I'm mentioning this other user. So after a time you're going to start producing content, because in Twitter content is really easy to produce. Okay, so the thing is, instead of starting with obsessing with producing content to getting visibility and getting an audience, we are going to start in a different way. First of all, I'm going to suggest you how to find interesting people to follow you. Not to create your audience, but to create a network of people that are interesting, that are working in similar topics as you, and that eventually a few of them can become collaborators. After that, after that, after finding people that are really interesting and amazing, the thing is that you have to start disseminating your work. Okay, I'm working. every single day, and I'm producing some output. I'm producing publication, I'm producing teaching materials. So why not? Why not disseminating that? And after learning about that, we can focus on the audience. We can focus on, okay, I've get these followers. Where would I want to go with this? What I want to achieve with this tiny platform that I'm building here on Twitter, right? So we're going to discuss all of this in future videos. The first one, it's going to be about networking, but as I say, that's going to be the next video.